What is up, everybody? This is your boy, Teran Rodriguez, bringing you another edition of Set Point. Thank you all for joining me on this beautiful Monday afternoon, Monday evening, Monday, wherever you are listening from. Either way, you've made your way to episode 359 of Set Point. And without any further delay, let us begin. But first and foremost, Set Point would not be where it's at without IE Sports Radio providing the platform to go live on YouTube and on X. Please do follow IE Sports Radio on different social media platforms such as X and on Instagram. Also, make sure to subscribe to IE Sports Radio on YouTube if you haven't already. We are nearing 500 subscribers. Yes, we are finally nearing 500 subscribers after we were in a bit of a lull. But definitely subscribe. I promise you all, if you subscribe, I will give you all more volleyball content to the best of my ability. Also, make sure to check out our website, iesportsradio.com, for all of your latest sports news, our hopeful blog to be back soon, and our other shows that are on the network as well. I mean, we have one dedicated to minor league baseball. We have one dedicated to baseball in general. We have one dedicated to soccer and hockey and basketball, and soon football, as in American football, as in college football, high school football, NFL, you name it. For the last 12 years, IE Sports Radio has been bringing you amazing content, ranging from interviewing legendary athletes, coaches, and authorized media personnel, pretty much what I did yesterday, to building tailor-made shows dedicated to all major sports around the country. Thank you to everyone for all of your support and for making IE Sports Radio your direct feed for all that sports. Before we get on into the show, let us talk about what we are all about with this little clip. I will see you all in a little bit.
For the last 10 years, IE Sports Radio has been bringing you amazing content ranging from interviewing legendary athletes, coaches, and other authorized media personnel to building tailor-made shows dedicated to all major sports cities around the country. Make sure to follow us at IE Sports Radio on X, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube to keep up with the latest in sports and with all of our shows. Also, make sure to check out our daily updated website at iesportsradio.com. At iesportsradio.com, you can see our daily show schedule and check out all of our show pages with personal bios to learn a little bit more about each of our awesome hosts. In addition to our show pages, you can catch the IE Sports Radio blog, Hall of Fame, Fans of the Month page, and our merchandise shop, including t-shirts, tank tops, caps, long sleeves, hoodies, and more. For now over a decade here at IE Sports Radio, we've continued to be by the fans, for the fans, and we thank you all for your support and for making IE Sports Radio your direct feed for all that is sports.
That's right, everybody. Definitely check out our website and definitely subscribe to us if you haven't already on YouTube. We would greatly appreciate it. And also follow IE Sports Radio on several different social media platforms, aka X and Instagram. And the way you can follow Set Point on social media is on X and TikTok at set_point.ie. I do need to refire up the TikTok just because it's been a long minute since I have posted on the TikTok. I promise you all, I'll try to get back to a consistent basis of posting on the TikTok. I'll probably start at least once the NCAA women's volleyball season begins in 2026, which isn't too far. We're less than 100 days away, by the way. But anyway, on X and TikTok, you can follow Set Point. And you can also follow me personally on X as well, at Teran Rodriguez 1. Going to try to get more fired up in terms of posting on there as well. I'm a little bit on vacation, but I digress. You can also follow Set Point on Instagram at set_point.iesr. That's where most of my content is going to be going. I promise you all I'm going to get all my clips and interviews updated up to speed from yesterday's AVP League. So bear with me on that one. And then also you could also follow Set Point on Facebook, Set Point. Set Point Facebook account is also tethered to the Instagram account. So whatever gets posted on Instagram also goes to the Facebook account. So that's something to note there as well. But with all that being said, let us get on into the volleyball action. So we have week 3 of the women's VNL to recap. I'm not even going to bother going into the USA women's side of things, just because for starters, I just think we need to just dive right into every match from the women's VNL. So just because it's only fair, right? Right. But last week we had week 3 of the women's VNL, and the first match that started it all was Turkey versus Poland. Now this was kind of an interesting matchup, just because, well, Turkey and Poland were right by one another in terms of the VNL standings, and both teams needed some wins in order to lock up the spot when it came to the women's VNL finals. But both teams were pretty close. So Turkey eventually took down Poland in 4. I am not surprised by how good Turkey is, just because Turkey, even though they have been battered and bruised throughout the entire season, they just keep finding ways to win. And, you know, having Melissa Vargas on your team definitely helps, just because she is just a talent unmatched. Like, that's the reason why Turkey is Turkey. I won't say without Melissa Vargas, Turkey doesn't have the success, but honestly, Melissa Vargas has really picked up the slack ever since a few of the Turkey players and their top Turkey players have gone down with injury. So you had that right there. It was a good win for Turkey as they got one step closer to making it to the VNL finals, while Poland suffered a tough loss, and you're about to see why that loss is going to come back to bite them in the butt. So the next, by the way, the 3 teams that were hosting were Japan, China, and Serbia. So the next matchup we had was Belgium and Dominican Republic. This one was kind of I wouldn't say a throwaway matchup, but for Dominican Republic's case, they needed this matchup to avoid relegation, just because they were kind of teetering toward that. But Belgium was able to take down Dominican Republic in 5. Belgium needed a miracle in order to make the VNL finals. They still kept their hopes alive after that win, but you're about to see that it didn't really pan out for them. And then as for the final matchup of Tuesday, depending on where you are in the United States or where you are in the world, you had the United States sweeping Thailand. Okay, this one was kind of obvious. This one was kind of not surprising. I mean, if you missed this matchup, or if you fell asleep, or you somehow forgot this matchup occurred, you didn't miss much. All you just saw was the U.S. taking down Thailand and taking care of business. Avery Skinner and Jordan Thompson obviously had their big matches. Logan Eggleston, I thought, was pretty solid as well. She led the team in digs, by the way. So overall, it was kind of expected. I mean, Thailand, just like Dominican Republic and as well as a few other teams, they were kind of teetering toward being relegated as well. So there you have it. Now I move on to Wednesday's matchups. Next up, you had Italy taking down Ukraine in 4. All right, this one I kind of thought was going to be a little bit of a trap matchup for Italy, but look, Ukraine had nothing to lose. Italy hadn't really finalized their spot in the VNL finals. They were right on the coattails of Brazil and the United States, but they needed a lot to go their way. And even if a lot had gone their way, they still weren't a lock to making the VNL finals. So Italy took down Ukraine in 4. That was a good win for them. And then you had Brazil taking down Japan in 4. So Japan, like I said, they were the host team. But Brazil, they just said, no way, we don't care. In the 4th set, it looked like the match was going to go 5, but Brazil made a crazy comeback and eventually took down Japan in 4. That was a very good win for Brazil, just because it kept them right on the coattails of the United States in terms of the VNL standings. And looking at the standings from a point of view, Brazil actually had, in terms of their final 3 matches, Brazil had the easier schedule when compared to the United States. The United States had Poland, Turkey, and Brazil, while Brazil had Poland, Thailand, and the United States. So Brazil picking up that win was very huge for them. And the Netherlands swept France after the Brazil-Japan matchup. This one was not too surprising. I mean, France was trying to avoid relegation, while Netherlands was fighting for a spot in the VNL finals. And Netherlands left nothing to chance. So a good win for Netherlands. And then you had this crazy matchup. You had Canada taking down host team China in 5. Now, this was a massive win. And you got to love what Canada has done. I mean, we as the United States may not be the biggest fans of Canada, but for them, they had an opportune chance to making the VNL finals, and they had never made the VNL finals going into this final week. So Canada had that on their minds right there. Then next up, you had Germany taking out Czechia in 4. Okay, not really the glamorous matchup. I mean, Czechia still had a chance of making the VNL finals, but the loss to Germany, I think, all but derailed it. In Germany, they were just fighting for glory just because they needed everything to go their way in terms of making the VNL finals, but it didn't happen. Then you had Serbia taking down Bulgaria in straight sets. Again, this wasn't ultimately surprising, but this was the kind of the case of way too little, far too late. So Serbia came in with a record of 2-6 in the going into the final week, and even though I think Serbia got most of their top players back, it was just kind of a too little, too late process. Just because 2 wins isn't really ideal when it comes to beating week 3. And then lastly, in terms of the Wednesday matches, you had Poland taking down the United States in 5. Now, I accidentally missed half of the matchup just because I had work and I was tired. But apparently I didn't miss too much. I did miss the United States losing, which was very disappointing because I think it was their 7-match win streak. No, it was their 6-match win streak. Their 6-match win streak. Or no, it was 7. It was 7. I'm sorry, I can't count today. I know I'm not trying to make a 6-7 joke, but their 7-match win streak did come to an end. But here's the thing: Poland was playing their B team, and so was the United States. But looking back at this matchup, I thought the U.S. had so many opportune chances of beating Poland. I mean, it was B team versus B team, but honestly, the U.S. definitely could have made this matchup theirs. They could have won this matchup. But I will say, Sage Kahina-Torres was phenomenal at the setter position. She almost had a double-double, but it wasn't the usual suspect starting. Though I will say Asia O'Neal had herself a nice game. Simone Lee Wank led the team with 13 kills, along with Logan Eggleston, who also had 13 kills. Stephanie Samity had 12 kills. But Poland, like I said, they didn't really play their B team. They did have one player. Well, they had 2 players with 28 and 20 kills and 24 kills respectively. But still, it's like both teams were kind of sitting out their starters just for the up and coming matchups, because that's a tough turnaround in terms of this whole VNL. And this is why injuries have been kind of plaguing a lot of certain teams, which really sucks. But yeah, the U.S. losing to Poland was not ideal because that kind of left the door open for Brazil. But we'll get into them a little bit later. They actually had themselves a bye on Thursday. So jumping to Thursday's matches, you had Canada taking down Belgium in 4. Even with Britt Herbots, Canada did not care. Canada was on a mission, and they kind of showed signs of a little bit of a letdown after beating China. But after that first set, and you got to remember, Canada got thumped in that first set 25-10. But then the second, third, and fourth set went Canada's way, though the fourth set, Canada needed overtime to beat Belgium. But Canada picked up another big win. That got them closer to the VNL finals, which was great for them. Then Japan took down Thailand in 4. Thailand, like I said, they needed to avoid relegation. Japan needed to handle business because they couldn't afford too many losses going into the last couple matches of their schedule. But Japan, I thought, handled business well. I thought they did a phenomenal job against Thailand, although they did lose that third set. But Thailand was had their backs against the wall. So there. Then you had China sweeping France. Nice little bounce back. Or I'm sorry, not China sweeping France. China sweeping Ukraine. Nice little bounce back for Ukraine for China, just because Ukraine, like I said, they were kind of trying to avoid a relegation. And after that loss, Ukraine was kind of in danger of getting relegated as well. But China was able to take care of business. They needed to win that one. Otherwise, they would have probably been in danger of probably being the 8th seed, which you're about to see in a little bit. Then next up, you had Netherlands sweeping Czechia. This pretty much ended Czechia's hopes of making the VNL finals. And it also strengthened the hopes of the Netherlands making the VNL finals, which... Look, Netherlands is one of the younger teams in the VNL this year on the women's side, but I thought Netherlands did a good job when it came to taking down Czechia. I mean, Netherlands knew that they couldn't take any opponent lightly, and they didn't. Then next up, I wouldn't say this was kind of a toilet bowl matchup, but this one was kind of the matchup where neither of these teams were going to be making it to the VNL finals. But for France, it actually meant a lot for them, just because if they lost this one, they probably would have been relegated. But thankfully for France, they pulled off an amazing reverse sweep win on the road against Serbia. Keep in mind, Serbia was one of the 3 host teams for this week, and France pulled off a very nice reverse sweep. So big win for France, as that pretty much got them close to not being relegated. And then you had the United States versus Turkey to close off the Thursday matches. All right, this one was kind of a fun matchup right here. And look, the U.S. needed this win in the worst way, while Turkey was on a tear. They were on a 6-match win streak, and Turkey, they were starting to believe. And Turkey threw everything at the U.S. Melissa Vargas, I think, had 32 kills and 18 digs. I'm not even looking at the box score officially, but Melissa Vargas is just unbelievably talented. She's just unbelievable, and the United States knew it, and every USA fan knew it. But the third set was kind of an interesting set. Late in the third set, it was 27-27. It looked like Dana Redke got a kill off the block. However, Turkey challenged, and there was no touch, but it looked like it got touched, but sadly, no avail. There was no conclusive evidence to keep the call as is. Melissa Vargas did have 32 kills and 18 digs, which was so phenomenal. But the fourth set, the U.S. managed to get it together. They won that set 25-21. And then the fifth set, the U.S. was up 6-5, but then Dana Redke went on a 5-0 serving run, and the U.S. was not losing. They eventually won that fifth set 15-8, and man, that was such a monster win, because the U.S. has momentum going into their final match against Brazil. It halted Turkey's 6-match win streak, and it also handed Turkey their first loss in a 5-set match. So, man, U.S. really clutched up when it came to that. Maybe Eric Sullivan did know what he was doing when it came to sitting the starters against Poland. But it is what it is, and yeah, it's a tough loss for Turkey. I mean, I'll just say this. Turkey has nothing to hang their heads over. I thought Turkey did a good job when it came to, doing everything it could to try to slow down the U.S., but Melissa Vargas just cannot carry that team by herself. I mean, she obviously can, and Turkey got a couple other big-time performances from a couple players, such as Aiden, who had 15 kills, and they also got 12 kills from Baladin, but it wasn't enough as Turkey fell to the United States, as Turkey was also running a 6-2 offense. So you had that right there. So going into Friday's matches, first off, we had Dominican Republic versus Ukraine. All right, this was the battle of not being relegated. So whoever lost this was pretty much teetering toward getting relegated, and Dominican Republic clutched up when it mattered most, as they took down Ukraine in 5. They almost got reverse swept, but Dominican Republic was able to clutch up, and I think that win might have actually sealed them not being relegated. So that was a big-time win right there for Dominican Republic. They have been going through it this entire VNL, not just on the women's side, but on the men's side as well. Then you had Brazil taking down Poland in 4 sets. This was another monster win right here for Brazil, and Brazil really did a good job when it came to facing Poland. Poland threw everything and then some at them, just because the second, third, and fourth set were just tight. Brazil managed to win the fourth set in overtime 28-26. And even though Poland did everything in its power to try to make sure Brazil did not win that fourth set, Brazil wasn't having it. So yeah, Brazil was all alone in first place with 2 matches to go. And every USA fan was thinking, all right, well, it looks like Brazil's going to be the top seed unless the U.S. gets a miracle. But you're about to see that a miracle did occur. Next up, you had Italy sweeping Belgium. I thought this was going to be a little bit closer, but I feel like Belgium kind of checked down. I feel like Belgium just didn't have that it factor when it came to them. And maybe it was because they knew their fate, that they weren't going to the VNL finals, and they kind of thought that this match was pretty much for glory. And also Italy did have Paula Egonu and most of their other starters. So you had that right there. Italy still kept its hopes of being the top seed of the VNL finals alive. Then you had Czechia take down Bulgaria in four. Again, Czechia had kind of already saw its fate sealed when it came to missing the VNL finals. But it was still a good win for Czechia over Bulgaria. Now, Bulgaria was kind of on the verge of being relegated. Like, I think it was the second to last day of the VNL. Or I'm sorry, not the second to last day. It was the third to last day of the VNL. After that full last day of Friday matches, it was down to just there were 5 teams with 2 wins: Ukraine, France, Dominican Republic, Thailand, and Bulgaria. Everyone else was safe from relegation. But those 5 teams had 2 losses, and any of those teams could have been relegated. But moving on from Czechia, Bulgaria, Netherlands sweeping Germany. Another big win for Netherlands, and Netherlands was starting to really believe. They were thinking, we are believing in ourselves. We are going to make it to the VNL finals. We are not going to lose out on this. So Netherlands swept Germany. And then the final matchup of Friday's matches was Thailand-Brazil. And I was thinking to myself, all right, well, I'm going to bed. I don't need to watch this matchup. Brazil's going to probably give Thailand a schoolyard beatdown. But right when I was about ready to go to bed, I just took a look at the matchup, and I was like, wait, Thailand's up 2-0 on Brazil? And Thailand didn't just win those first 2 sets. They thumped Brazil 25-15 and 25-16. Now, you're probably wondering, why did Brazil lay such an egg? Because eventually Thailand did sweep Brazil. Brazil was resting most of, if not all, their starters. They didn't have Ana Cristina. They didn't have Julia Bergman. They didn't have all their starters. I don't blame Brazil for doing this, just because I think last week I said maybe some of these teams could be resting their starters if they have a spot finalized in terms of the VNL finals. But I didn't expect Brazil to rest all their stars, and I didn't expect them to lose. But man, Thailand really just came ready to play. And I mean, this loss, everyone will say this loss has an asterisk on it just because Brazil didn't play all their starters. But I will counter and say this. This loss might actually hurt Brazil when it comes to the VNL finals. But I digress. So a big win for Thailand, as I think that win all but secured them not getting relegated. But for Brazil, that kind of put them in a sticky situation, just because now they were tied with Italy and the United States going into the final 2 days of the women's VNL. So speaking of Italy, this was Saturday's matches as Italy took on Canada. And through the first 2 sets, it looked like Canada was ready to pull off another big win and stamp their spot in the VNL finals. But then Italy said, let us reintroduce ourselves. We're Italy. We're the reigning VNL champions, or back-to-back VNL reigning champions, and we're also the Olympic gold medalists from 2024. You ain't beating us that easy. And Italy did not fold. They wound up reverse sweeping Canada, and I was very impressed by Italy. Now, Italy needing a reverse sweep meant that they didn't get the full 3 points. They got 2 points. But it was still a big win. A win is still a win, even though you didn't get the full 3 points. And then Canada getting 1 point is still pretty darn good. It's just unfortunate that you just couldn't seal the deal in sets 3 and 4. Sets 3 and 4, Italy wound up winning both those sets by 25-23. And then after that matchup, you had Turkey versus Japan. All right, this one was a very fun matchup. And Turkey took down Japan in 4. I said to TMZ Volley, or it's kind of a volleyball account that covers Turkey volleyball on the men's and women's side. But I said this matchup against Japan is going to be interesting, just because if Turkey loses this matchup, that could hurt their seeding in terms of the VNL finals, or it could also bump them out of the top 8 entirely, or in this case, the top 7, just because China going into the final 2 days, they were on the outside of the top 8. So for Turkey to pull off a big clutch win right there against Japan on the road, mind you, despite losing a heartbreaker the day before, it was massive for Turkey. Turkey clutched up when they needed to. And look, this Turkey team is something special. If there's any team that could still win the VNL finals, even though they've been battered, bruised, and been through the ringer, it's Turkey. And then you thought that matchup was wild. you had this matchup. Dominican Republic taking down China in 4. I could not believe this by any means. Dominican Republic took down China, the host team. Now, this win meant that Dominican Republic was not going to get relegated. This was a clutch win, and whether Dominican Republic was battling it out for glory or they were just battling it out just because they knew they didn't want to get relegated, the fact that they beat China on the road was very impressive. Now, China might have been resting starters just because they're the host team of the women's VNL, and no matter what happens, they were in the VNL finals no matter what. But I don't care. Dominican Republic beating China was very impressive on the road as well. But honestly, I can't really speak for China on if they rested their starters or not. Maybe they just limited their starters' minutes. But honestly, I wouldn't blame China for resting their starters or sitting their starters. Just because China can't afford to lose their star players. And lots of teams were losing their star players from teams like Turkey, Italy, Poland, you name it. I think the U.S. was exempt from that, but I digress. And next up, we had the don't get relegated matchup. You had France versus Bulgaria. France wound up winning in 4, and I think that pretty much sealed them to not getting relegated. While Bulgaria, that was the loss that unfortunately sealed them to getting relegated, sadly. It sucks for Bulgaria just because I don't think they were in last year's VNL, but they were in this year's VNL. So the next highest team post VNL finals is the team that's going to be replacing Bulgaria. There's no Challenge Cup this year. The Challenge Cup has been scrapped entirely. So it's the next highest team post VNL finals that will be replacing Bulgaria. Who is that team? I'm not sure. Then you had Serbia sweeping Germany. Okay, this was kind of a matchup where neither team was getting relegated, but neither team was going to be making the VNL finals. So this was kind of a for glory matchup. And then Ukraine swept Belgium. God, you feel bad for Belgium. I thought Belgium was rather impressive because they took Poland to 5 in the first match of the women's VNL, but they just couldn't really respond after that. And you got to feel bad for most of their team as well, mainly for Britt Herbots. She was the VNL leading scorer, and unfortunately, or the VNL all-time leading scorer or something like that. Either way, she had over 1,300 points in her volleyball career with Belgium, but unfortunately, she and her team couldn't get it done. But I think she still has a bright future ahead of her, and Belgium will be back hopefully soon. All right, now for the big matchup. So we had the primetime matchup. We had 2 primetime matchups at 8 p.m. We had Thailand versus Turkey, and then the United States versus Brazil. Let's go over United States-Brazil. So the first set, U.S. fell behind 5-1. I was just worrying at that point. I'm like, oh no, Brazil, this is shaping up to being Brazil winning this, isn't it? Because whoever won this pretty much was in the driver's seat of clinching the number 1 seed of the VNL finals, depending on how many sets they wound up winning in, though. But the U.S. was able to turn it around. They went up 22-20. Brazil tied it up at 22-22, but the U.S. wound up winning the first set 26-24. That was a massive win right there for the U.S. I was very concerned going into the first set, but the U.S. wound up winning that first set, and man, that was a momentum bringer right there. Now, the second set, it just felt like after losing that first set, Brazil, it was just kind of one of those when it rains, it pours matchup, and that was kind of the case for Brazil in that second set. So not only did they lose the second set, early in set number 2, they lost their middle blocker, Julia Cudias. And she is look, I don't know how to say this, but she's had many season-ending injuries. I think the past couple of years she's had season-ending injuries, and she was doing phenomenally when it came to the women's VNL. But unfortunately, Cudias suffered an ACL injury. She landed awkwardly, and then her knee, I think, bent sideways, and it was officially determined that it was an ACL injury. And oh man, you just got to feel bad for her, just because she was having a great women's VNL, and then sadly that happens. I think she collided with her teammate, and then the knee went sideways, and I feel bad for her. But even though Brazil had that happen, Brazil actually went up 14-10, But eventually the U.S. turned it around, and even though Brazil tried to make a late comeback, the U.S. was able to take that second set 25-22. And I was still not convinced that the U.S. was going to win. I was thinking, okay, they're up 2-0, but the job ain't finished. But then the third set occurred, and the U.S. eventually, after a little bit of a sluggish start, the U.S. was able to find their footing. I said in my recap video that the U.S. wound up winning the third set 25-18. It was actually 25-16. So my apologies for that. But the U.S. wound up winning that third set 25-16, which was very convincing in my opinion. And the U.S. swept that match, and they punched their ticket into the VNL Finals as the number 1 seed. And that was clutch right there, just because that meant Italy, no matter what happened in their matchup against China, they weren't getting that number 1 seed no matter what. So the U.S. not only wound up winning that matchup, but they swept Brazil. And like I said, they wound up clinching the number 1 seed, which was huge. So congratulations to the U.S. on that big-time win. I was overall impressed by the U.S. I wouldn't say this was a full-on masterclass, but it was still a masterclass. Then next up, you had Turkey taking on Thailand in 4. Okay, this isn't ultimately surprising, but look, Turkey is still Turkey. And Thailand, even though they had themselves a nice win over Brazil, they kind of got to remember that Brazil was resting most of, if not all, their starters. And speaking of Brazil, this is kind of where losing to Thailand kind of hurts them. I get they were resting their starters just because they want all their starters available and fully rested and fresh for when they take on the United States. But you also kind of, losing that matchup also kind of hurt them in terms of the standings. So you're about to see that in a little bit, that matchup actually, that the U.S. beating Brazil and Brazil losing to Thailand actually hurts them. But Turkey wound up finishing the VNL strong by taking down Thailand in 4. That was a very good win. And yeah, this means that Turkey had been punched into the VNL finals regardless. Like most of these teams had already punched their ticket in. And I think that Turkey winning also finalized another spot. So Turkey was into the VNL finals. And then joining Turkey was Canada as they took down Dominican Republic in 4. And with that win, Canada, for the first time in its team's history, is into the VNL finals. I can't believe it either. Canada has had themselves an amazing renaissance in terms of the VNL finals on the women's side. It all started with Canada beating the United States, which I thought was kind of fluky. I thought it was maybe Eric Sullivan just not being smart. But I think it just shows that Canada is the real deal. So a great job to Canada for beating Dominican Republic, bouncing back from the loss against Italy, and punching their ticket to the VNL finals. So Canada actually finished as, well, I'll give their seeding out a little bit later. But the next matchup we had was also big for the VNL finals. You had Japan versus Poland, which actually had a lot on the line when it came to the VNL finals. I think the loser of this was going to get bounced from the VNL finals in terms of being in the VNL finals. But in the end, Japan being the host team, they wound up reverse sweeping Poland. Japan was on a 2-match losing streak, and they knew a third loss would have pretty much all but ended their hopes of making the VNL finals. And thankfully for Japan's sake, they were able to clutch up. And yeah, they pulled off a very impressive win right there. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, wow, Japan pulled off a reverse sweep. But at the same time, I'm not ultimately surprised. I thought Japan knew what was at stake, and they knew if they won, they would be in the VNL finals. And I actually mistook. Japan had lost two. They lost 2 straight. They lost 2 of their last 3, or 2 of their 3 matches, and they couldn't afford to lose a third match. Otherwise, they wouldn't be in the VNL finals. But they eventually did, and it was very impressive that Japan just pulled off a massive upset, right? Well, I wouldn't say upset because both these teams were like right there with one another. I thought both these teams were going to be in the VNL finals, but with Poland beating Japan, Poland is now on the outside looking in because they can't catch Netherlands. Even if Netherlands lost their last matchup, which they didn't, Japan, I'm just kidding. Netherlands did lose their matchup. But regardless of what happened, Poland is out of the VNL finals. So, God, that's a tough break for Poland. But They had a few of their chances, and they just couldn't beat the teams that they should have beaten. So it's tough to molly for Poland, but it is what it is. So Japan pulling off the win, punched their ticket into the VNL finals. Then you had Czechia taking down France in 5. Okay, that wasn't really too big of a matchup, but I will say Czechia and France, that was a very fun matchup, especially with set 5 going 20-18. A very good win for Czechia, even though they were just playing for glory, and same can be said for France. Then next up, you had Italy taking on China, where Italy took down China in 5. For China's sake, whether they were resting their stars or not, this was a good showing for them. But for Italy, they knew their fate was sealed when it came to not getting the number 1 seed. Even if they had won in straight sets, Italy still would have lost the tiebreaker to the United States via set ratio. But it was still a good win for China, as they have some momentum. They got 2 points out of it. So regardless of what happened in that matchup, Italy wasn't going to get the number 1 seed. But they did lock up the number 2 seed. So Italy locked up the number 2 seed, which meant Brazil was the number 3 seed. Turkey was the number 4 seed. Canada was the number 5 seed, which was very nice. Japan was the number 6 seed. And then the final seed was Netherlands. So Netherlands, no matter what happened with their match against Serbia, spoiler alert, Netherlands lost to Serbia in straight sets. Netherlands was going to be the number 7 seed. But yeah, Netherlands, I think when Netherlands found out that, I think it was, but when Netherlands found out that Poland lost, they knew they didn't need to play their starters. I don't want to assume or say that they maybe rested their starters, but I would honestly rest my starters too if I found out that my team was in the VNL finals and my team was going to be the 7 seed, no matter what happened. And that was the case when it came to this matchup. And yeah, that's what the Netherlands did. They lost to Serbia, but in the grand scheme of things, they were locked in as the final team that made the VNL finals. The final team that meant the final team that made it to the VNL finals. That sounds like an oxymoron, if in my honest opinion. But I think Netherlands would have been in regardless. I mean, Netherlands was earning 3 points in all their wins. They had won 3 straight matches, and I think whether Poland won or whether Japan won, I think Netherlands would have been in regardless. Because had Poland won, then they would have had the 21 points, and Japan would have had 20, and Japan would have been on the outside looking in. But yeah, Netherlands was in regardless, and that was big for Netherlands. So they just basically, I mean, if they rest their starters, they rest their starters. But honestly, they were in the VNL finals regardless. But yeah, Serbia swept Netherlands to end Serbia's run in the VNL. I mean, Serbia didn't make the VNL finals, but still a nice way to end it. It really sucks that they couldn't get. I'm blanking on their star player's name. It's not Antropova. She's on Italy. But regardless, Serbia at full strength would have been better. But honestly, you gotta control what you can control. So yeah, moving on from that matchup. Now, last matchup we had was Germany-Bulgaria. Germany swept Bulgaria. Bulgaria's gonna get relegated, like I mentioned. Bulgaria's fate was sealed when they lost to France. So there you go. All right, but that is that right there when it comes to women's VNL. But I just got to say, for the U.S.'s sake, I know Eric Sullivan gets a lot of flack from fans. I always read that Eric Sullivan is making the worst possible play, worst possible decision. And I know they mock him for him saying that all that we're trying to do is everything is going to try to be gold. I think we got to give Eric Sullivan his flowers. Is that crazy for me to say? Yes. But Eric Sullivan, in his second year as the women's national team head coach, he has the U.S. as the number 1 seed. Keep in mind, last year, the U.S., they barely got in. I mean, I think it was the second to last day they got in. And I know he had the not so smart play or the not so smart decision of being the 8 seed instead of the 7 seed or 6 seed. But honestly, Eric Sullivan has really turned this team around. It's one of the younger U.S. rosters, even though they're the 3rd oldest team in the women's VNL. But honestly, Eric Sullivan does deserve his flowers for getting this team to the VNL finals as the number 1 seed. So there you have it right there. And ladies and gentlemen, just need to show you all one more thing. Behold, the VNL finals bracket. So this is the women's VNL finals bracket. You have the United States taking on China, and then you have Turkey taking on Canada. The matchups will start on Wednesday, July 22nd, which is basically 9 days from now. And that's the left-hand side matchups. And then the right side bracket matchups will be Italy, Netherlands, and then Brazil, Japan. That will be on Thursday, July 23rd, which I think is pretty cool. So I'll be giving a little bit more of a preview and predictions when it comes to this a little bit on next week's show. But yeah, that's pretty much your bracket right there. Just going to flash it one more time. Yeah, that's the bracket to the VNL finals. Photo or the graphic is courtesy of the VNL or Volleyball World or their respective owner. But there you go. But that'll do it for the women's VNL side of things. We're going to take ourselves a quick commercial break. When we come back, we've got the men's VNL to preview, the U.S. men's national team for week 3, and a little bit of some AVP League to recap, as well as some League One volleyball to discuss. So keep it locked here. You were listening to Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that sports. We'll be right back after this. First, let's actually get into what one of our shows is all about. See you then.
From the stadium lights to the stadium shade, the clubhouse crews, the on-field MCs, delicious park food and the summer breeze. Every voice in the game. Catch Dirt and Diamonds every single week. The California League coverage that you seek with Larry B and Freddie B running the show. Every minor league season for the latest in the California League with Larry B and Freddie B on IE Sports Radio. Keep that dirt flying, and we'll see you next pitch.
That's right, everybody. Definitely check out our show, Dirt and Diamonds, with Larry B and Freddie B. No relationship, by the way. And also check out all of our other shows. We have another show going on, the Bullpen Bulletin, happening with Mike, Pat, and Freddie B. So definitely tune into that. Definitely tune into all of our shows. We're all a bunch of diehard fans of sports that definitely love talking sports and definitely love bringing you all unbiased opinion and no hate and no hot takes or anything of that sort. To an extent. But let us get back into the second half of Set Point, just because, well, we have still quite a bit to talk about in terms of the volleyball side of things. So let's actually talk some men's VNL. But before we get on into that, we need to reveal the Week 3 men's VNL roster for the United States. Just because, well, for starters, the United States. And there it is. So as you can see, I don't think I don't think the graphic is getting blocked by the little title thing down below where it says USA Men's Volleyball National Team. So the Week 3 team is kind of the same. The only difference is that Mason Briggs substitutes Kyle D'Agostino, and then Cooper Robinson substitutes Gabby Garcia, which kind of had USA fans a little perplexed. So there's your US Week 2 men's volleyball roster. So something to note is that the U.S. is going to be hosting the men's VNL this week in Chicago, Illinois. And I will say I envy everybody that gets to go to this. I sadly won't be able to go just because, for starters, I don't have the money. I unfortunately don't have the funds to fly myself out to Chicago. In addition, I don't have the funds to, get to a hotel and so on and so forth. It really sucks just because I really would. I haven't been to a VNL since 2023, or was it 24? Either way, I think it was one of those years, and that was back when it was 2023. I remember going to Bulgaria versus the United States, but I got to attend as a fan, so I didn't get a chance to attend as a media person, which makes me sad face, but it is what it is. I got to at least attend that matchup. No, the Nikolov brothers weren't playing at the time. Not even Alex was playing on the national team, but it is what it is. Anyway, for those of you that are in the Chicago area, attend. United States fans, USA volleyball fans, if you're a fan of volleyball in general, please attend the VNL, which will be happening in Chicago, Illinois. The United States needs you, and all the teams that are partaking in the VNL in Chicago, Illinois will need you. In addition, I will just say it's going to be scorching hot in Chicago. It's going to be scorching hot everywhere. So please dress accordingly. Please stay hydrated. Don't die on us, please. Anybody. But yeah, this week is going to be a massive, massive heat wave. So if I were you, I would definitely dress accordingly. Dress cool, stay cool, and stay hydrated as well. But I digress. Anyway, but yeah, the VNL roster, it didn't really change all that much. It's just two players just switching out. Cooper Robinson and Mason Briggs are on the main roster, while Gabby Garcia and Kyle D'Agostino are off the main roster. But it is what it is, and sometimes it just happens. But yeah, Cooper Robinson was still pretty impressive in the second Stars versus Stripes scrimmage. I wouldn't say I'm ultimately surprised that Mason Briggs is back on the roster. Maybe he kind of got a little dinged up in week 1, and then he kind of lost his spot in week 2. Hence why he didn't play in the second Stars versus Stripes scrimmage. But happy to see Mason Briggs back on the main roster. No, nothing against Kyle D'Agostino, mind you. But yeah, this week's roster isn't as different as it was in week number 2. It was pretty much the same for the most part, minus the 2 that I just mentioned, but I digress. All right, but that is that right there when it comes to the men's side of things for the USA men's volleyball side of things. So now let's get on into week 3 of the men's VNL. So week 3 of the men's VNL. So like I mentioned, the U.S. is one of 3 hosts for the final week of group stage play as teams are fighting to make the VNL finals and not to get relegated. So the other 2 hosts, other than the United States, are Japan and Serbia. And then you also got the United States, like I mentioned. It is going to be played in Chicago, Illinois. And like I said, I'm envious of those that get to attend. And it really bums me out that I can't attend. But it is what it is. And I guess I just got to save up my money or hope that USA Volleyball adopts me and makes me part of their organization. But I digress. All right, but looking at this week's standings, so as we all know, Japan is all alone in first place. They have a 2-game lead ahead of the United States, who's in second place. But yeah, Japan is 8-0. They're the lone team undefeated in the VNL, period. Whether it's men's side or women's side, Japan is the lone undefeated team in the VNL. Then you got the United States and Poland in second place. Slovenia is not too far from Poland. They're in fourth place. Ukraine is in fifth place. They have 5 wins. Italy is in 6th place. Turkey is in 7th place, and that's kind of where the cutoff is. So just like on the women's side, China is hosting the men's VNL, and looking where China is, they're 17th. Now, I kind of wonder, I think after this, I think China, even if they finish last, the relegation doesn't mean anything. They'll still make it to the VNL finals, but it's just that next year, China will get relegated. So there. But let's not get to the relegation process. So the first team out in terms of the VNL finals would be Bulgaria. And that's hard to believe. It's because Bulgaria has so much talent, aka the Nikolov brothers. And then Brazil would also be left out. They're the second one out. They are in 9th place. Not too far off from Bulgaria, however. Then you still got Germany and Serbia vying, as well as France. Belgium's in 13th place. Iran is in 14th place. Argentina's in 15th place. Those teams that I just mentioned, Iran and Argentina, they're not actually out of the woods in terms of relegation. Then 16th place all the way to 18th place is Canada, which I think is maybe the best 16th place team ever. They're 1-7, but they have just caught so many bad breaks in terms of 5-set matches. And yeah, Canada still is loaded with talent, even as a USA, even as someone from the United States. I think Canada is talented. It's just that they've caught so many bad breaks. Between them and Argentina, they've caught the worst breaks of all. Then China is 17th. They will be hosting the men's VNL no matter what. So even if China does finish last, they will be in the VNL finals, which kind of makes me wonder. Let's say China does get relegated after this year, but they win the VNL finals. Would that save them from relegation? Probably not, but I digress. But the last team in terms of the men's VNL standings is Cuba. They have yet to win a match, and I feel bad for Cuba because they've gone through it the worst. They have been going through it the worst, just like Argentina. And I mentioned Dominican Republic on the men's side has been going through it. Cuba has been going through it as well. Anyway, but now let's look at these matchups. So we'll start with tomorrow's matchups. This will be late. This will be kind of late to start. So first matchup, you got Canada versus Argentina. All right, this has toilet bowl written all over it. This is a toilet bowl matchup. With all due respect to Argentina and Canada, this is kind of the bad luck Bill matchup. Both these teams have had awful luck when it comes to the VNL, and it's very doubtful. Matter of fact, they're not going to be making it to the VNL finals. Like, Canada would need a miracle, and so would Argentina. I mean, Argentina, I think, has a better chance, but this is kind of the battle of not to get relegated. But this is going to be the most underwhelming yet exciting matchup to start week 3 of the men's VNL. This will be taking place in Osaka, Japan, by the way. So you got Canada, Argentina to start things off. There's not really much to talk about. It's the most exciting toilet bowl of all time. And I don't mean to say it like that. I don't mean to say that negatively. I'm just saying that both these teams have had awful luck. They're both bad luck Bill. Really talented team, caught so many bad breaks in terms of the VNL. Next matchup you got is Belgium versus Cuba. All right, I wouldn't say this is kind of a toilet bowl matchup. I mean, but Cuba, if there's ever a chance for Cuba to win matches, it's got to be this week. If Cuba can't win a match this week, bye-bye. But Belgium, I wouldn't call Belgium the best, even though they did have the leading scorer of last week's VNL from week 2. But I will say they better not lose to Cuba. I mean, Cuba, if they can get most of their team back, I mean, I know they have their middle blocker out due to injury. I think Cuba might have a chance in this, but we shall see. So that's late Tuesday's matchups. Then on Wednesday, you got Japan versus Italy. So Italy is the number 2 team, is still ranked number 2 in the world, while Japan is ranked number 5 in the world. Hard to believe that Japan is number 5 in the world, even though they're first place in the VNL standings. Yeah, it's hard to believe myself. Look, Japan's going to really see their schedule take an uptick. I think even though they got through most of the worst part of the schedule, I think Japan is still going to get challenged. And Japan only needs like a few wins here and there. I think they only need like 2 wins would be their magic number in order to claim the top seed of the VNL finals. Italy, on the other hand, they have not finalized their spot in the VNL finals. And they could really use some wins going forward just because they had a few setbacks here and there, but I think Italy, they still pose a big threat in terms of winning the VNL finals, but we shall see. Next up, you got Germany taking on Slovenia. So Germany, they have an outside chance of making the VNL finals. They need to run the table. Meanwhile, for Slovenia, they're still mathematically in the hunt to be the number 1 seed, but they need a lot to go their way. Slovenia, just like the other teams pretty much not named Japan, they have not locked up a VNL final spot yet, but Slovenia still has some darn good players on their team. So I think for Slovenia, they definitely have a good chance of making the. They're obvious. They should make the VNL finals. I'd be surprised if they failed to make the VNL finals. Germany needs everything to go their way and then some, but we shall see. Next up, you got Ukraine versus Iran. All right, if Ukraine loses this matchup to Iran, it's got to be because Ukraine wasn't at full strength. But Ukraine has just been playing some of its best ball. Keep in mind, this is only year 2 of the Ukraine being in the men's VNL, which I think is really impressive. Ukraine has been the biggest surprise, though the talent on their team hasn't really been too much of a surprise. I just think that Ukraine has definitely been. They've just been overly impressive this year. They've nearly pulled off some big wins here and there, and I think Ukraine might be the most dangerous team going into the VNL finals if they make it. All right, now we got a very fun matchup. You got Bulgaria taking on Poland. So Poland is still the number 1 team in the world, while Bulgaria is the number 9 team in the world. But Bulgaria is on the outside looking in. Poland is right beneath the U.S. They still have a chance at the number 1 seed in terms of the men's VNL finals. But look, Bulgaria, they're too talented to miss the VNL finals. Bulgaria is going to be fighting like heck, which means Moni Nikolov is going to be moneying the competition as best as he possibly can. Then you also have Alex Nikolov and then the rest of the Bulgaria team. But all you need to know is that Alex Nikolov and Moni Nikolov are going to be digging into their bag of tricks. Like, this Bulgaria team is going to be fighting like heck to make the VNL finals. But this first matchup really concerns me just because Poland, they still have a chance at the number 1 seed, and they want to get a good seed in terms of the VNL finals. So we'll see what happens. Next up, you got Serbia taking on Turkey. So Serbia, again, they still have an outside chance of making the VNL finals. Turkey, on the other hand, they're the last one in terms of making the VNL finals. It's really been I talk about Ukraine being the most impressive team in the VNL on the men's side, but Turkey has also been a very pleasant surprise. I've been ultimately impressed with Turkey. Nobody really thinks, and I hate to say this, I don't want Turkey fans to get mad at me, but when it comes to volleyball, Turkey on the men's side doesn't really pop out as a team that like is able to win this whole thing. But Turkey has really been impressive this VNL. I've been ultimately impressed by them. If they make it to the VNL finals, oh man, no matter what happens, they have my respect on the men's side. So you have that right there. And then next up, you got France versus Brazil. All right, this is another fun matchup right here. So France, just like Serbia and Germany, they have an outside chance of making the VNL finals. Meanwhile, for Brazil, they're still in the hunt. They still have a better chance of making the VNL finals than France does. But this is basically an elimination matchup. Whoever loses is pretty much out of making the VNL finals, unless they run the table and then they get some help from the rest of the other teams. But France-Brazil is going to be an exciting matchup. This is the battle of last year's back-to-back VNL. Not last year's back-to-back VNL champions. The Olympic gold medalists versus a talented Brazil team that definitely is better than what the record indicates. Because you got to remember, Brazil was 4-0 going into week 2, and then they dropped 3 out of their 4 matches, which has them sitting in 9th place, which puts them in a precarious situation. All right, next matchup, you got the United States taking on China. If the U.S. loses this matchup, I will be angry. There will be an angry video released after that matchup, and I will go ballistic if the U.S. loses to China. The only way the United States is losing to China is if the United States is playing their third stringers and China is playing out of their minds. But that ain't happening. The U.S. is beating China. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Anyway, so that's your matchup right there. That's kind of the preview right there. Final matchup for Wednesday, you got Belgium taking on Italy. All right, Belgium, Italy. Here's the difference between those two. Belgium has talent, but they're in a very, very, very precarious situation. Like, they need everything to go their way and then some. And even if they win out, they're still not a lock to making the VNL finals. Meanwhile, for Italy, they still have a chance of making the VNL finals. It's just a matter of where they're going to be placed. But if they lose 2, maybe 3 matches, then that could jeopardize their chances of making the VNL finals. And then if they lose out, then Italy is gonzo. But it's hard to believe that Italy is the number 2 ranked team, and they're in a precarious situation where they have to win out or get close to winning out. All right, so you have that matchup right there. And then Thursday, you've got Japan, Canada. All right, Japan, Canada. Japan, look, I think this is going to be an exciting matchup just because, look, Japan is obviously so close to making the VNL finals, but you cannot overlook Canada. Canada is much better than what its 1-7 record going into this week indicates. Like I said, Canada has had awful luck in terms of winning matches just because they can't seem to win a 5-set match to save their lives. And now they're facing the leader of the men's VNL. So if Japan plays their cards right, they could be locking up a spot in the VNL finals. But that Italy matchup could be tough. I mean, Canada is also a tough customer if they have all their starters clicking on all cylinders, but we shall see. But yeah, Japan, if Japan thinks they're going to get an easy matchup from Canada, they've got another thing coming. Even though Japan is the host team or one of the host teams, Canada is basically have nothing to lose. And yeah, if Canada does somehow lose, or if Canada does somehow win, then I will be surprised to say the least. So you have that matchup right there in terms of Thursday's matchups. I'm not going to go over too much when it comes to too much of this whole thing, just because I've already gone over some of these other matchups. But next matchup, you got Iran versus Germany. I don't want to say this will be a toilet bowl, but Germany, if they win their matchup against Slovenia, that's a big if, however. Germany could potentially go on a mean streak because they've got Iran, and then I need to look up who they're next to. Then they got Serbia, which is not necessarily an ultimate winnable matchup. It's kind of winnable, but not ultimately winnable. But they've got Ukraine as well. So Germany's got a tough schedule when it comes to this week. So it'll be really tough, but we shall see when it comes to that matchup. I mean, Germany, I wouldn't say is bad by any means. It's just that they're in a very sticky situation. Even if they win out, they're no guarantee. But if they win out, then they put themselves in a good situation in terms of making the VNL finals. But we shall see. Next matchup you got is Serbia-Ukraine. This is another fun matchup. So this is a very, very good matchup. And honestly, I wouldn't necessarily say that Serbia is bad. They're 4-4 going into this week, but they're dangerous just because they're one of the 3 host teams for this week. Meanwhile, for Ukraine, they are 5th in the VNL standings, but they cannot underestimate Serbia by any means. Ukraine's got to be playing its brand of volleyball, and this one loss, like, let's say Ukraine is still 1 game ahead of Serbia. Let's say Serbia beats Ukraine. That puts Ukraine and Serbia tied with the same record. That being said, Ukraine has 16 points going into this week, while Serbia has 12. So Ukraine would either have to win only 2 points, and then Serbia would only have to win, or would have to win 3 points. But a lot has to go the way of Serbia, but we shall see. So you have that matchup right there. Then you got China versus France. This is target practice for France. If France loses this, then they don't deserve to make it to the VNL finals. Like, France is already in a pickle this week because they're not going to get relegated, but they could be missing the VNL finals. And it's hard to believe just because France has so much talent. It's just that ever since they beat Italy in week 1, they've kind of been on a cold streak, but they kind of brought it back in week 2 when they won 3 of their last 4. So yeah, France is not losing to China. I'm sorry to China fans, but France is not losing to China by any means. So spare me the hate comments. Anyway, next up you got USA versus Brazil. I kind of think the U.S. could win this matchup, but here's the thing. Brazil's going to be fighting like heck for a spot in the VNL finals. And you already know Brazil fans love to show up and show out. Like, Brazil fans are kind of like Nebraska fans. They're passionate about their team. But when it comes down to it, I think the U.S. definitely has a good shot. That's why I'm encouraging you, USA volleyball fans, USA volleyball fans, volleyball fans in general. Show up and show out when it comes to this. Make sure you are getting your tickets because they're going to be flying just like that. And USA volleyball fans, you better be there when it comes to this matchup. I don't care if you missed the China matchup. You better be there when it comes to the U.S. taking on Brazil because that is a rivalry as old as dirt. Do not miss that matchup if you are a USA volleyball fan. Anyway, so next up you got Cuba versus Argentina. All right, this is the don't get relegated matchup. Though I think Argentina should have a better chance of beating Cuba. Like, Cuba is in a very sticky situation. Even if they win one matchup, I still don't think it's a guarantee that they avoid relegation. But we shall see. If Argentina loses this matchup, then Argentina does not deserve the VNL finals. And heck, maybe we can make the case that Argentina should be relegated. But only one team gets to be relegated. Everyone else is safe. Then we jump to Friday's matchups. You got Japan versus Belgium. I don't want to say this is going to be a boring matchup, but if Japan plays their game, and you got to remember, Japan isn't even at full strength. I think this week we can be getting Japan at full strength. But I will say this, as long as Belgium's top scorer from week 2 doesn't go off, I think Japan should be fine. Is that cliche? Yes. But it's the truth. Next up, you got Turkey versus Ukraine. All right, this has a lot of VNL finals implications. And heck, this could probably be a preview of the VNL finals in terms of their matchup. But Turkey and Ukraine, they're both fighting for VNL final spots. And man, both these teams have been really impressive. It really sucks that one of these teams, if not both of these teams, could be missing the VNL finals. But it all depends on which team wins the big points. I just think that Ukraine has just been a pleasant surprise, but just don't count out Turkey. Turkey is a very, very, very good team. Next up, you got Iran versus Slovenia. Slovenia should win this matchup. If they don't, then Slovenia doesn't deserve the spot that they want in terms of the VNL finals. Like, Iran isn't bad. I mean, they're still in danger of getting relegated, but they're far from going to get relegated. Like, Iran, of all the teams that have 2 wins or 2 or less wins, Iran is probably the most safe. But we shall see. Then you got China, Bulgaria. Bulgaria ain't losing to China. If Bulgaria loses to China, USA volleyball fans are going to be laughing their butts off. But there's no way Bulgaria loses to China. Bulgaria is fighting for a spot in the VNL finals. China is not good. Sorry, China. And honestly, it just, the math isn't mathing of China beating Bulgaria. Like I said, the only way Bulgaria loses this matchup is if China plays out of their minds and Bulgaria is resting the Nikolov brothers and all their starters. So there you go. Next up, you got Brazil, Poland. All right, this is going to be a very fun matchup just because I think both these teams are really good. You got Poland, which is number 1 in the world, while Brazil is number 7 in the world. This one could have fireworks, and this one could be do or die or feast or famine for Brazil. Because if they lose to the United States and Poland, that could really hurt their chances of making the VNL finals. If not, that could actually seal their fate. So I think for Brazil, this is must-win This is definitely must-win territory for Brazil. I mean, France isn't even a guaranteed win. So this week is a brutal week for Brazil. France right off the bat, then you got the United States, and then you got Poland. That's 3 tough matchups right there. And if they lose all 3 of those matchups, you might as well just send Brazil to Cancun, because I don't think there's any coming back from that. Anyway, jumping over to Saturday's matchups, you got Argentina versus Italy. If Italy play, look, not that I don't think Argentina is bad. They're the team that's caught. They're one of the 2 teams that have caught bad breaks. And I think I missed one matchup, which is my bad. I think I missed one more matchup. Oh yeah, I missed Brazil after Brazil Poland. There was one more matchup on Friday, and this is the real toilet bowl for this week. This is the toilet bowl for this week. Canada, Cuba. I'm sorry, but it's the truth. I mean, China is second to last when it comes to VNL standings. But here's the thing about China. They're hosting the VNL finals. They are in the VNL finals no matter what. Cuba and Canada are fighting not to get relegated. This is the toilet bowl matchup for this week. Is it going to be interesting? Yes, because one of those teams could get relegated. If there's ever a week for Cuba to pull off some wins, it's this week. They've got Belgium. They've got Canada. Those are 2 winnable matches right off the bat. And then for Canada, if they don't go 5 with Cuba, they should win. That's the thing about Canada. They don't like 5-set matches, but we shall see. Now back to Argentina, Italy. If Agustin Loser has himself a big matchup, I think Argentina has a chance to pull the upset. But Italy, they're fighting for their VNL finals lives. They know they can't afford another loss or 2. So I expect Italy to pull off the win. But we shall see. Then you got Turkey, Slovenia. This is going to be another fun matchup right here. If if Turkey beats Slovenia, Turkey deserves the VNL finals. There's no doubt in my mind. Put Turkey into the VNL finals no matter what. Because beating Slovenia is a big deal. Then next up, you got Serbia, Germany. All right, this is an elimination matchup for one of these 2. So let's say Serbia and Germany both win their first 2 matches. They face one another in an elimination match. Whoever loses this matchup is eliminated from VNL finals. And heck, whoever wins isn't even a lock for the VNL finals. But this one is kind of an interesting matchup. So if everything plays out the way for Serbia and or Germany, you already know that both of these teams could be fighting for the VNL finals lives, but we shall see. Then you got France, Poland. All right, this is another fun matchup right here. France's record isn't indicative of who they are because they're still a top 10 team in the world, while Poland is the number 1 team in the world. If France wants to have any hope of making the VNL finals, they gotta beat Poland. I mean, I think everyone could have probably pegged this going into the VNL from this year as a preview of the VNL finals. But France has just not been their France selves ever since the Italy loss. But they still have a chance at the VNL finals. And then for Poland, they're still in contention of getting the number 1 seed. But the number 2 seed isn't as bad. So chances are, I think, Poland is going to want to pull out everything from their bag of tricks. And I already love the matchup right here. It's going to be Wilfredo Leon of Poland taking on, I forget the guy's name, but Clement of France. So there you go. Then next up, you got USA, Bulgaria. All right, this one I think, all right, this is the one. This matchup I think could be match of the week. And I say this based off of Bulgaria's roster. This is where every volleyball fan is going to be flocking to. I would not be surprised if this matchup was sold out. I would not be surprised if this matchup was deafening. If you were at this area or if you're there for the USA Bulgaria matchup, you're going to be getting a barn burner here. And this is a revenge matchup for the United States just because Bulgaria eliminated from the World Championship last year, for those that remember. So this one probably is match of the week material, and this one probably has sold-out crowd written all over it, just because USA fans not only want to see the United States, but they also want to see Moni Nikolov. Moni Nikolov, back when he was at Long Beach State, it was Moni Mania. It was Beatlemania with Moni, as Alan Knipe, the former Long Beach State men's volleyball coach, once said. So yeah, Beatlemania, aka with Moni, is going to be this matchup is going to be bonkers. USA Bulgaria this week is going to be bonkers. Just so much Long Beach State men's volleyball in this matchup. It's going to be fun. After that, you got Belgium, Canada. All right, this is the stinky cheese matchup. This is another one of those stinky cheese matchups. Belgium shouldn't be relegated, but if there's ever a match for Canada to win that's not named Cuba against an opponent not named Cuba, it's this one. I think Canada, with Skylar Varga and all those other talented guys on the Canadian national team, I think they've got a good chance at winning this matchup. Canada is much better than what their 1-7 record says, so I think Canada has got to win this matchup, but we shall see. And then closing off the matchups on Saturday, you got Cuba, Italy. This is target practice for Italy. If Italy loses this matchup to Cuba, they don't deserve the VNL finals. End of discussion. All right, and then Sunday, you got Japan, Argentina. Man, Japan, I said that their schedule was going to pick up. I think Japan's schedule, other than their first two matchups, is pretty favorable. I think if Japan wins their first two matchups, they could just rest their starters for their last two matchups, because Argentina probably won't be making it to the VNL finals. And then and then the other opponent that I mentioned, Belgium, I don't think they're making it to the VNL finals either. So this could be one of the matches where Japan rests their starters. So there you go. Then after Japan, Argentina, you got Turkey, Iran. Same with Turkey. But this is okay. I wouldn't say this is a rest your starters matchup, but if Turkey does beat Iran, they should be close to a lock. If not, they are a lock. So I wouldn't say that this is an easy matchup. Like, Iran has been competitive against certain opponents, but at the same time, it's just that Iran, they just can't seem to close out. Turkey, on the other hand, has learned how to close out. So we'll see what happens when it comes to Turkey. Then you got Ukraine, Germany. All right, let's set the stage when it comes to this matchup. Let's say Germany beats Serbia. Germany, and let's say Ukraine does lose to their next opponent, which is, I actually forgot. But either way, let's say Ukraine loses their matchup to Turkey. This could be an elimination matchup when it comes to the VNL finals. Let's say Germany, this could probably be for a spot in the VNL finals, but we shall see. Like, Germany does have the ball is in their court. It's just a matter of they have to win the matchups. Like, their final two matchups being against Germany and Serbia, that could determine on if they make the VNL finals or not. But at the same time, they can't underestimate their first two opponents either. So Germany definitely has a lot to play for this week. Then after Ukraine, Germany, you've got China, Brazil. Brazil should win this one. End of discussion. China has got the most brutal schedule this week. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if China went 0-4 this week. It would be really funny if China was the one that gets relegated, but they make it to the VNL, but they're hosting the VNL finals. It would be even funnier is if China got relegated next year, but then they wound up winning the VNL finals this year. I still wonder if that saves them or not. I digress. Then you got the battle of the S's, Serbia versus Slovenia. It all depends. Let's say Serbia beats Germany. Serbia still would have a chance at the VNL finals, but let's say Slovenia winds up winning at least two, if not three of their next matchups. If Slovenia wins three of their matchups, Serbia ain't surpassing Slovenia. But let's say Slovenia only wins one or two of their first matchups going into this matchup. This could have a lot of potential in terms of maybe, well, for Slovenia's sake, it has the potential of finalizing your spot in the VNL finals. And then for Serbia, this could be the case of it's feast or famine with them. They'll either make the VNL finals or die trying. And for Serbia, they have to pretty much win all their other matches to have any sort of good chance of making the VNL finals. Then next up, you got Bulgaria, France. All right, this is another good matchup right here. And again, this could be for a spot in the VNL finals, or this could be for glory. It all depends. But Bulgaria, they know that what's at stake here. France knows what's at stake here. Both have brutal schedules this week. I already know this one's going to be a very exciting matchup. I think this one is going to be this could also be a sold-out crowd matchup. That's because there's a lot of talent from both these teams, but we shall see. And then the last matchup for week 3 of the men's VNL is USA versus Poland. USA outside of China has a brutal schedule this week. So let's say USA lost two of their 3 matchups. Let's say they beat China, but then they lose to the likes of Brazil and they lose to the likes of Bulgaria, both being heartbreakers. This matchup is also a big one. Poland's fans, I know, can show up and show out. But at the same time, I know the U.S.'s fans should show up and show out. Just because I hope for the sake of the U.S., it's not going to be like, what was it, last year when it came to the women's or men's hosting, where the opposing team's fans outnumbered the USA fans. Like if we get a case where the USA's fans are outnumbered by the opposing team fans, I'm going to go sicko mode. Anyway, but USA-Poland's going to be a very exciting matchup. Poland are the back-to-back VNL champions. Well, the U.S. missed last year's VNL finals. So USA has a very good shot at making the VNL finals. I imagine even with the lone win against China, they should be in. But they can't leave anything up to chance. And who knows, maybe they'll be the number 1 seed. So we'll see what happens when it comes to the U.S. and Poland. I think it's going to be a very fun matchup. But I hope it's not a sweep. Like, volleyball fans that'll be in Chicago deserve a barn burner of a final matchup of the group stage play of the VNL. So there you go. All right, but that is that right there for the men's VNL preview. This is going to be an exciting week. I think on the men's side, anyone can win the men's VNL in terms of the VNL finals, but we shall see when it comes down to it. I think it's a very, very fun week, and I can't wait to see what's in store for this week. So chances are, I think we're going to be on the edge of our seats when it comes to the relegation matches, or we're going to be on the potential relegation matches, and we're going to be on the edge of our seats when it comes to the teams that are vying for the VNL spot or the number 1 seed. So there you go. All right, but that is that right there when it comes to the men's VNL finals, and that'll basically do it for the VNL. Oh no, we had to have this glitch happen. So it's been a minute since we've had the little glitch happen where I turned sideways, but unfortunately it happened. So there you go. All right, but let's jump on into the AVP League. So AVP League Week 5 recap. So the AVP is back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. The AVP is back, and where they went to was the city of Long Beach. So I got to attend day 2. Unfortunately, I was too busy when it came to attending day 1, which really stunk, but it is what it is. So the first matchup was, why is everything like out of sorts? As like the entire ew. Like, I'm looking at the results website. Like, why is the LA Launch Brooklyn Blaze matchup, why is this not in chronological order? Anyway, I'm going to do my best to try to go in chronological order. So, first matchup we had on 7-11, aka Slurpee Day, was the LA Launch versus the Brooklyn Blaze. I don't know if that was the exact matchup, but it was Maddie Anderson and Elena Chacon of the LA Launch taking on the Brooklyn Blazes, Lexi Denneberg and Julia Donlin. In the end, Anderson and Chacon took down Donlin and Denneberg 15-7 and 15-13. It was a good win for Anderson and Chacon just because they're the young they're kind of the young guns when it comes to the VNL. So that's something I'll always look forward to. And then also on the women's side, you had the Miami Mayhem, which consisted of Kelly Cheng and Megan Kraft taking on the Dallas Dream, which consisted of Kylie DeBerg, and Betsy Flint. God, why is my voice giving out, dog? Sorry, my voice can't be cracking. Especially since we're at the most important part of the show. Anyway, Kelly Cheng and Megan Kraft took down Kylie DeBerg and Betsy Flint in straight sets, 15-8 and 15-11. Long story short, when it came to this matchup, there wasn't too much danger for Cheng and Kraft. And even when I talked to DeBerg yesterday, she said that this was not their best showing. This was an ugly matchup. And I hate to say this, but this was an Olympian and a future Olympian taking on someone who hasn't been the AVP for too long, and then a veteran as well, who pretty much I think I wouldn't say she was just coming off of paternity leave, but either way, it was pretty much a mismatch. With all due respect to Betsy Flint and Kylie DeBerg, because they're a good duo, it's just that Cheng and Kraft, that's like a cheat code right there. Like the Miami Mayhem as a whole, their team entirely is unfair. They have three Olympians, Taylor Crabb, Andy Benish, and Kelly Cheng. Benish and Cheng were both recent Olympians, while Crabb was a past Olympian. And then we already know that Megan Kraft is going to be an Olympian. She has been in the AVP since 2000, since she was 16 years old. She's been partaking in AVP tournaments since she was 16 years old. I am not kidding you. This was back when she was playing at Torrey Pines, back when she was just a wee baby. Not like a wee baby, but you know what I mean. Like she was even playing indoor at the time, so you have that right there. Anyway, moving on to the men's side, you had Hagen Smith and Logan Weber of the LA Launch taking on Andy Benish and Taylor Crabb of the Miami Mayhem. The Mayhem, which consisted of Crabb and Benish, took down Smith and Weber in straight sets, 15-11 and 15-9. I wasn't ultimately surprised, just because, like I said, the Miami Mayhem have literally They have pretty much all Olympians from past and present. It's like not fair for Smith and Weber, even though they have great team chemistry. And then the last matchup we had was the Brooklyn Blaze, which consisted of Derek Bradford and Evan Corey taking on the Dallas Dream, which consisted of Paul Lottman and Miles Partain. And in the end, the Blaze outlasted the Dream in a scorcher, no pun intended, winning it 15-11, 14-16, and 18-16. And God, if you're Miles Partain, you got to feel bad for the poor fella, just because he and his partner, Paul Lottman, did all that they could to try to take down Derek Bradford and Evan Corey. And here's the thing. Derek Bradford and Evan Corey, this isn't the first time that they've beaten Partain and Lottman. Remember, in the Huntington Beach Open, those two took them down as well. So there you go. All right, next up, day 2. So I got to attend day 2 of the AVP League. And first and foremost, thank you to Greg Ball for having the awareness of emailing me directly and saying, hey, if you haven't registered for a credential for AVP League Week 5 in Long Beach, you better do so. It's like, how do you know this? How did you know I was going to be attending AVP League Week 5? Like, Greg Ball must know something I don't. Or he either watches the show. But either way, he knows a lot of things. But I got to thank the AVP entirely for letting me be part of the action as a member of the media. You rock. Anyway, so first matchup was Maddie Anderson and Elena Chacon of the LA Launch taking on Kelly Cheng and Megan Kraft of the Miami Mayhem. The first set, neither team led by more than 2 points. Anderson and Chacon had set point at 14-13, but Cheng and Kraft rattled off 3 straight points to give them the first set 16-14. Then the second set, Anderson and Chacon got off to a 5-1 lead, but Cheng and Kraft brought it back. Eventually, Anderson and Chacon wound up taking the second set 18-16 off a service ace from Anderson. And then in the third set, the Mayhem eventually got off to a fast start, and unfortunately it wasn't a fast start. Both teams were tied neck and neck until after 7 points. Cheng and Kraft were able to pretty much pull away from Chacon and Anderson, winning set number 3, 15-12. I just kind of think this was the case of experienced partners and experienced volleyball players taking on still of the youngest growing group. And it's hard to believe. And I still even have my interview with Maddie Anderson and back when she was with I'm blanking on her name. Molly Shaw. I still have my interview with Maddie Anderson and Molly Shaw, which is hard to believe. But it's amazing how Elena Chacon and Maddie Anderson have grown. But unfortunately, they just couldn't take that next step against Kelly Cheng and Megan Kraft. But the fact that they really pushed them to an hour and 7 minutes, which was the longest match of the entire weekend, speaks to volumes of how Anderson and Chacon are just growing and on the rise when it comes to the AVP and the entirety of the beach volleyball league or the beach volleyball scene in general. So really awesome to see. But Kraft and Cheng wind up winning this. They wind up winning. So there you go. Then on the women's side, continuing on, we had the Dallas Dream taking on the Brooklyn Blaze, which was Lexi Denneberg and Julia Donlin of the Blaze taking on Kylie DeBerg and Betsy Flint of the Dream, which I thought was cool. But while we got the longest matchup of the weekend, we got the second to shortest longest matchup of the weekend, as we got Kylie DeBerg and Betsy Flint taking down Lexi Denneberg and Julia Donlin in straight sets, 15-12 and 15-10. I was a little surprised that Flint and DeBerg was able to pull off this win. I mean, yeah, I kind of also think that Betsy Flint has the advantage over Donlin and Denneberg just because both of them are – Betsy Flint and Julia Donlin did play with one another as partners. But all at the same time, Betsy Flint just has so much AVP experience. Too many acronyms to remember. But Betsy Flint has a lot of AVP experience, and Kylie DeBerg is just a force in the net. She is – I want to say she's like 6'5". She has to be like 6'5" or taller. But either way, Kylie DeBerg and Betsy Flint are just too good. They knew that yesterday's matchup against Maddie Anderson and Elena Chacon was a complete stinker. I'm sorry, not Maddie Anderson and Elena Chacon. Megan Kraft and Kelly Cheng was a complete stinker. They knew that that matchup did not define who they were as a pair. So I liked how Betsy Flint and Kylie DeBerg just responded. But I was very surprised that Julia Donlin and Lexi Denneberg went 0 for 2 last weekend. But it's a matter of learning and winning when it matters most. So I think those two will be fine going forward. It's not easy being the reigning champion of the AVP on the women's side. So there you have it. And then the second to last matchup of day 2 of AVP League Week 5 was probably the most exciting one. The LA Launch on the men's side, where it was Hagen Smith and Logan Weber taking on the Brooklyn Blazes, Derek Bradford and Evan Corey. So the first set, Corey and Bradford wound up squeaking out the first set against Weber and Smith, 15-13. Then the second set, it was pretty much all Weber and Smith as they took down Bradford and Corey, 15-9. Then the third set, it was very exciting. So Bradford and Corey went up 13-11, and I was thinking, all right, it feels like this is a matchup where Corey and Bradford win. Not so fast, my friend. Hagen Smith and Logan Weber wound up scoring the next 2 points to tie it up at 13-13. And then there was a net violation on, I think it was Bradford. Either way, it was net violation on the Blaze. And that negated what could have been a match point for the Brooklyn Blaze. And now was the match point for the LA Launch. And Hagen Smith, I didn't know this. He was named the best server of the AVP League last year. He dealt the walk-off service ace. And then afterward, he just ripped his shirt. It was epic. I was just like, I don't think I've ever seen that. So that was just an epic moment where he dealt the walk-off service ace. I was just in awe. It's like, wow. I also just got to say, Hagen Smith might have the best hair of the AVP. And I'm not saying that to, be weird and whatnot, but bro literally has long, long hair. And it's so perfectly coiffed. I don't think AI could even perfectly coif that hair as well. So there you go. So you had that matchup right there. And then you had the final matchup, which was the Dallas Dream taking on the Miami Mayhem on the men's side, which was Andy Benish and Taylor Crabb of the Mayhem taking on Miles Partain and Paul Lottman of the Dream. This was the battle of the Olympians. Paul Lottman was an Olympian in indoor men's volleyball. Miles Partain was just a recent Olympian. Taylor Crabb was a past Olympian. And then Andy Benish was a past Olympian who was partnered up with Miles Partain. So the first set was the longest set of all of the sets when it came to the AVP League Week 5 in Long Beach. So that set, I don't even remember how many set points each team had, and that's the name of the show, Set Point. But what I can tell you is that Taylor Crabb and Andy Benish outlasted Lottman and Partain, winning that first set 23-21. And that was kind of the momentum booster that they had. I felt that Miles Partain and Paul Lottman kind of got deflated after losing that first set. And even Partain said in his brief recap or debrief that unfortunately he kind of let the emotions get the best of him. And I wouldn't necessarily say that it was Partain and Lottman being bad. It's just that Taylor Crabb and Andy Benish, they're clicking with one another. And you got to remember that they haven't been partners for too long. This could be the future for the LA 2028 Olympics for beach volleyball. Like these two, Andy Benish and Taylor Crabb, they are just unbelievable. So eventually Crabb and Benish took set 2 from Partain and Lottman 15-10. And altogether, the Miami Mayhem lost only one set on the men's and women's side. And they are just kicking butt and taking names. It's just unbelievable right there. So, yeah, the Miami Mayhem, like I said, they are just so unfair when it comes to their roster. They've got 3 Olympians and 1 future Olympian. And the LA launch, I will say, they were fortunate to salvage 6 points and 2 wins, while the Dream and Blaze both salvaged 1 win, while the Dream salvaged 4 points. Courtesy of Kylie DeBerg and Betsy Flint. By the way, my interviews will be going up tomorrow. I just haven't had enough time to post the interviews. I also have to edit everything and clean up everything. So there. And then I also have some other highlights from the AVP League Week 5. You won't want to miss it. I'm going to be posting that to Instagram as well. So there you go. All right, but thank you again to the AVP. A great showing from Long Beach, even though there was only one set of bleachers which had a capacity of 1,000. We got to switch that up. I mean, the AVP League is, as good as the AVP League is, there's still some things it could tweak. Like, for starters, there could be more bleachers or more opportunities to watch. But, yeah. And maybe they were also televised on CBS Sports, so you had that right there as well. So either way, looking at the standings, it doesn't really do it any justice. But the Miami Mayhem are on top of the league standings in terms of overall teams. I'm not sure about the individual side of things, but there you go. So now the AVP League will be going to week 6, and that will be this week or this weekend. So this week's AVP League will take place in Central Park, New York. So it'll be playing at Woolman Rink. So the teams partaking will be the Austin Aces, the New York Nitro, the Palm Beach Passion, and the San Diego Smash. So the San Diego Smash and the Palm Beach Passion will have the first matchup. So on the men's side, you got Chase Budinger and Miles Evans taking on Trevor Crabb and Phil Dahlhauser. That's the battle of the Olympians right there as well. All 4 of those players that I just mentioned, they're all Olympians, past and present. And then on the women's side of the San Diego Smash versus Palm Beach Passion, you have Megan J. Rice and Gina Arango taking on Melissa Jimena Paredes and Brandy Wilkerson. That's going to be a very fun matchup right there. It's going to be a battle of Olympic power versus AVP experience and AVP on the rise. And then also on the you have this matchup, the New York Nitro taking on the Austin Aces. You have Kame Shulk and James Shaw of the Nitro taking on Troy Field and Ryan Wilcox of the Aces on the men's side. And then on the women's side, you have Tony Rodriguez and Molly Shaw taking on Taryn Brasher and Kristen Cruz for that matchup. I will just say there's going to be a lot of LSU royalty in that matchup. Minus Molly Shaw, who unfortunately is a okay, I'm just kidding. Not unfortunately. She's a GCU alum, but at least she wasn't. I embarrassingly thought she was a Florida State alum back when she and Maddie Anderson were partnered. Anyway, yeah, a lot of purple royalty when it comes to those matchups in terms of schools, but I digress. Then on Sunday, you've got the San Diego Smash versus the New York Nitro. On the men's side, you got Chase Bundinger and Miles Evans taking on Kame Shulk and James Shaw, which I think is really cool. And then on Sunday, in terms of the women's side, you got Megan J. Rice and Gina Arango taking on Tony Rodriguez and Molly Shaw, which I think is, I think Gina Arango is the only, I wouldn't say OG, but kind of I don't want to say oldest player in the AVP when it comes to that matchup, but she's the one with the most experience. There you go. And then you have the Palm Beach Passion versus the Austin Aces to close things out. You got Trevor Crabb and Phil Dahlhauser taking on Troy Field and Ryan Wilcox. I think that might be the most experienced pair versus the most inexperienced pair, or the youngest pair. But either way, that's a fun matchup right there. Then we close off, hopefully we close off with this matchup. Melissa Jimana Paredes and Brandy Wilkerson of the Palm Beach Passion taking on Taryn Brasher and Kristen Cruz of the Austin Aces. This will be matchup number 22 when it comes to these two teams, as Brasher and Cruz lead the all-time series between Jimana Paredes and Brandy Wilkerson 14-17. So when it comes to Brasher and Cruz facing one another against Jimana Paredes and Brandy Wilkerson, all bets are off. TKN versus Team Canada. You already know that is going to be a very, 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 very fun matchup right there. That matchup will feed families. That has to be the match of the week. You have to save that for last. If the AVP does not save that matchup for last, I swear I will not be happy. But anyway, looking at the standings, the Austin Aces have only played 4 matches, as well as the San Diego Smash. And then the Palm Beach Passion, they've played 12 matches as a whole. And then you've also have the New York Nitro, which has also played 12 matches. So we're going to be seeing a lot more Austin Aces and San Diego Smash because they've played the fewest amount of matches altogether. So there you go. All right, but that's that for the AVP side of things in the preview of the week 6 of the AVP League, and I really should have turned on my light. And that is my bad. Central Park is next up. So I might as well just go over the info when it comes to this whole thing. So week 6 of the 2026 league season takes the AVP to Central Park in New York City. This iconic... Someone needs to learn how to edit when it comes to this website. So event details. It says week 6 of the 2026 league season takes the AVP to Central Park in New York City. This iconic. That's it. All it just says is this iconic. It's like, this iconic what? Why are you leaving us in the dark? Who are your editors? Like, I don't mean to say this in a negative way, but this is kind of my gripe when it comes to the AVP. It's just a lot of things go unfinished. Like their X presence is so scarce. I get it. X isn't really people are moving away from X and they're moving just to TikTok and Instagram. But still, X is a social media platform. Update it. Anyway, everything that I just mentioned is in the correct order when it comes to the matchup schedule. So there you go. I'm sorry. Not everything is correct. So Saturday is the women's Palm Beach Passion versus the women's San Diego Smash. And then you also got the women's Austin Aces versus the women's New York Nitro. And then on Saturday, you got the men's Austin Aces versus the men's New York Nitro. And then later that matchup, you got the men's Palm Beach Passion versus the men's San Diego Smash. Then Sunday, you got the women's Austin Aces versus the women's Palm Beach Passion. Horrible marketing right there. You don't start off the AVP or day 2 of the AVP League with that matchup. You start off with the matchup, or you leave that matchup for the match of the day. Like, AVP, look, I like the AVP, and I'm willing to cover it, but they have some of the most questionable things happening. They need USA Volleyball's help in the worst way. Or they need at least my expertise. I will gladly aid to help promote the AVP entirely. Anyway, women's Austin Aces versus women's Palm Beach Passion at 1 p.m. And then after that, you got men's Austin Aces versus men's Palm Beach Passion. Then women's San Diego Smash versus women's New York Nitro. And then men's San Diego Smash versus men's New York Nitro to close off week 6 of the AVP League. So there you go. So small bags are allowed. All bags will be subject to search. Beach chairs, umbrellas, and coolers are not permitted in ticketed areas. There is no dress code enforced, but shoes and shirts are required. And yeah, know before you go. And I imagine New York is going to be hot as well. So there you have it. All right, that's that for the AVP portion of the show. So I do want to talk about League One volleyball. So this week, teams are being announced left and right, which I think is really awesome if you ask me. When it comes down to it, I'm starting to be more concerned about the MLV because a lot of the players from the MLV are leaving to go to League One volleyball, which I think is rather fascinating if you ask me. But at the same time, it's like, what's going to happen with the MLV? Like, this kind of concerns me just because the AVP League, or not the AVP League, wow, I've been going on for too long, but this kind of concerns me for the MLV, because if the MLV is getting poached in terms of all of its players that are leaving for League One volleyball, then you got to be really concerned for them. I'm hoping the MLV doesn't eventually become a belly flop, but they'll eventually get some players playing in that MLV. It's just that they also got to get all their teams together, like Las Vegas and San Diego have got to come back. So there's something to note right there as well. But yeah, League One volleyball is just killing it. And also, I also just got to mention that Jordan Larson is now unretired. Jordan Larson is coming back to League One volleyball. I don't think she'll be back on the national team, but I just got to say, really? I basically gave that whole little spiel of Jordan Larson is going to go down as one of the greats. And we had that final farewell tour just for Jordan Larson to come out of retirement. And I get it. Yes, it's cool that she is coming out of retirement. I'm happy that she is coming out of retirement. But at the same time, it's like, do we really need to have that little thingy right there? Like, come on. Just please. Are we going to get another farewell tour for Jordan Larson? Like that also remains to be seen. So we shall see. Chances are we might be getting it back. But yeah, that was kind of the big news that happened last Friday. I couldn't believe that. I was at work when I saw that news. I'm like, really? Jordan Larson is back? Now I really got to see some League One volleyball matches. And thankfully, League One volleyball is coming to Los Angeles, which has some notable players such as Catherine Plummer, Carly Lloyd, the volleyball player, not the soccer player, coming to League One volleyball Los Angeles, or Love Los Angeles. So there you go. There was also some other big news, but I want to know your guys' opinion. Is League One volleyball going to overtake the MLV, or will the MLV survive in terms of its league? Just because a lot of notable names are going to League One volleyball, not just Olympic-wise, but somewhat internationally as well. So there you have it right there. But I want to know what your guys' opinion is. Do you think League One volleyball is going to overtake the MLV, or is it basically, or will the MLV just survive? Or am I just overreacting? So we shall see when it comes down to it. But overall, that's pretty much that for League One volleyball. I think all the rosters will be finalized this week. I don't have time to go over all of the rosters. There was some sort of big-time news. Oh, yeah, this is some big-time news when it comes to FIVB. So Russia is now going to be reinstated on the men's and women's side when it comes to the VNL. They will be able to qualify for the VNL next year. And also, I imagine they'll be the team that replaces whoever gets relegated. So on the women's side, from what I saw from Joe McCurdy's little breaking news post, Russia was ranked number, I think it was 8 or 9 when it came to the women's side before they got in trouble when it came to their little ban. And then on the men's side, I think they were ranked number 3. So Russia is back in terms of the VNL. And heck, they could be back in terms of the Olympics, which I think is really cool. But both the the Russian volleyball teams on the men's and women's side are top 10 teams in the world, which I think is really cool if you ask me. So yeah, the Russian national teams will be reinstated in the FIVB world ranking with the same ranking points they held when their points were frozen following the FIVB Board of Administration's decision. This news was released on Wednesday? Yeah, last Wednesday. And I was very surprised at this news as well. And I'm sorry if you all can't really see me, but I'll be wrapping up soon. We're nearing 2 hours, gosh. But yeah, the Russia women's national team was ranked 9th in the world. They had 277.59 points, while the Russian men's national team was ranked number 3 in the world. They had 352.10 points, which I think is really cool. It's great that the game of volleyball is growing again, and we get to see these two teams, or the Russian teams altogether, coming back altogether. But it just shows that you just cannot play stupid games, because if you play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. And Russia can't afford to be being stupid in terms of anything of that sort. So there you go. Yeah, thank you, FIVB, for reinstating Russia. It makes me happy to see teams like that basically coming back to restoration and basically coming back to fruition. So my thoughts on it are it's good for the game of volleyball. So there you have it. And I can't wait to see what Russia has in store for us in terms of the VNL, because I think Russia will be replacing the team that gets relegated. So Russia on the women's side will replace Bulgaria, while Russia on the men's side will probably replace either Cuba or Canada or China. But we'll see. But that'll do it for that little bit of news right there. I know I waited till the end of the show to talk about that, but there you go. But that's that for the Russian men's and women's national team being reinstated. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for this week's episode of Set Point. I know I went nearly 2 hours, but we have a lot of volleyball happening. We got the last week of the men's VNL, which one of the hosts will be in the United States. Go to that. You won't be disappointed. And then you've got the AVP League back in action, and a lot of things happening in the world of volleyball. So I'm here to cover it all for the most part. And also keep an eye on the USA Challenge Cup, which will be played between the United States and Canada, which will be on August 15th and 16th, which will be played at the University of San Diego at Jenny Craig Pavilion and at Brent Event Center on Sunday, which will be the 16th. But that'll do it for this week's episode of Set Point. For everyone here at iSports Radio, this is Teran Rodriguez signing off. Have a great rest of the week. Keep on the lookout for my volleyball content on X and on Instagram and on Facebook. I'll try to get TikTok reinstated, but we shall see. But until then, have a great rest of the week. Enjoy all the volleyball action, and I will see you hopefully soon. Take care, everybody. Peace.